When I got the frantic call that my wife was being hauled out of her mother's wake by HOA security, I thought I'd misheard. But when I pulled up, there she was sitting on the sidewalk, sobbing uncontrollably, her black dress ripped, mascara streaking her face. "Who gave the order?" I demanded, barely holding it together. A prim woman in stilettos pointed at herself with a smirk and said, "I did. HOA rules are rules." She didn't recognize me, and I froze, my stomach dropping. Of course, I knew her, Carolyn Pierce, the self-proclaimed dictator of the Homeowners Association. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just some random neighbor. I was the state attorney general, and I don't let things like this slide. It's not every day you see your wife dragged off her own mother's lawn like a trespasser during her mom's funeral, but that's exactly what happened that dreary Tuesday afternoon in Oakwood Estates. The wake was supposed to be simple family and a few friends, some chairs under a tent in the front yard, sandwiches on a table. Nothing loud, nothing disruptive. But Carolyn had other plans. She saw my wife, Emily, mourning her mother and decided it was a Class C violation of HOA Rule 7B, unapproved gatherings. Emily had been a wreck since her mom passed. This wake was her lifeline, her chance to say goodbye. And Carolyn, this polished, clipboard-carrying bully, turned it into a power play. I knelt beside Emily on the sidewalk, holding her as she trembled, the humiliation of being tossed out of her childhood home carved into her expression. I stood up, mind racing, but I didn't shout. I locked eyes with Carolyn and asked again, "Who authorized this?" She jutted her chin out and pointed to herself. "I did. HOA rules." I didn't argue. I turned to Emily, said we'd go home quietly, and held her hand as she cried the whole drive back. Once we got there, I made her tea, helped her out of her ruined dress, and waited until she fell asleep, exhausted and shattered. Then I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, laptop open, not for work, but for war. Let me back up. Emily's mom, Margaret, moved into Oakwood Estates 4 years ago. She was a kind, old-school lady who loved gardening, potlucks, and chatting with neighbors. Back then, the HOA wasn't so oppressive before Carolyn turned it into her fiefdom. When Margaret got sick, Emily and I spent a lot of time at her place, mowing the lawn, driving her to doctors, trying to be good neighbors. We followed the rules. But Carolyn still found ways to hassle us. First, it was Margaret's trash cans left out 5 minutes late, fined. Then her mailbox color not approved earth tones. Once, we got a warning for parking our car 2 inches past the driveway line. Carolyn was the type to patrol with a ruler, thriving on petty control. She never asked what I did for a leave Kakakis, button-up, clean sedan. She probably pegged me as a mid-level office drone. She had no idea I was the state's newly elected attorney general. This wasn't just personal animosity, it was in my jurisdiction. I didn't waste time. I dug into Oakwood's HOA bylaws, city zoning laws, and state regulations on private property governance. My screen filled with tabs, PDFs, and notes. I wasn't after revenge, I wanted a weak spot. It didn't take long. Their bylaws required mediation for fines overdue law 500, but Emily got no mediation, just a security guard and trauma. Then I found their enforcement clause was flimsy. They had no legal right to physically remove anyone from private property, especially not a homeowner's family. And the kicker, their security team wasn't licensed, said no permits, no training, just a couple of retirees in polo shirts. That made the HOA liable the second they touched Emily. I didn't storm in with lawsuits or threats. Carolyn fed on drama, shouting matches at board meetings, all caps emails. She wouldn't expect silence, strategy, precision. So I stayed quiet. I skipped the next HOA meeting, letting her think she'd won, that her little crusade had crushed us. Behind the scenes, I called in favors, HOA filings, state compliance records, an anonymous tip to the property oversight office. Within a week, I had enough to make them nervous, but I held off. Then Emily got a lettera de la $1,250 fine for hosting an unregistered event, delivered by a smug board member with no appeal process. She broke down again, wondering if she'd done something wrong. That's when I stopped playing defense. Carolyn wanted to wield rules like a weapon. I'd drown her in them. Before I could act, a late-night knock came. It was Leonard, the HOA treasurer and one of Carolyn's cronies, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Something's off with the books," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "I think Carolyn's hiding it." He didn't come in right away, hovering like he was confessing a crime. I waited, letting the silence pull it out of him. "She's skimming from the beautification funds," he said. I asked questions, and she threatened to boot me off the board. Then the bombshell. Carolyn had personally okayed the security volunteers to physically enforce Relesno vote. No legal backing, just her handwritten note. This wasn't petty Anna-Marie, it was fraud, abuse of power, and a scared insider spilling it in my leave-wying room. I thanked Leonard, promised his name wouldn't come up, and watched him leave, relieved and terrified. "She fights dirty," he warned. I smiled. "I fight with subpoenas." The next day, I went to work public filings, tax records, HOA financials. As a concerned citizen, I asked colleagues for off-the-record advice, dropped hints to the State Oversight Board, and fed a tip to a local reporter. Would a widow dragged from her mom's wake by an HOA be news? She said, "Get me video, and it's the lead." Lucky for me, a wake guest had filmed it grainy, but clear enough. Emily in black, pulled from her family, crying as guards said, per Carolyn's orders. I didn't post it myself, too traceable. I used a burner account on a neighborhood forum. HOA removes grieving daughter from mother's funeral, Oakwood Estates. It spread fast. Comments erupted, outrage, disgust, stories from other residents about Carolyn's reign. That night, Emily scrolled through them, a faint spark of vindication in her tired eyes. She whispered, "Thank you," and leaned on my shoulder. Carolyn thought it'd blow over. It didn't. I filed a complaint with the state nonprofit office, citing financial discrepancies and bylaws violations, and tipped off Consumer Protection about the unlicensed guards. An emergency HOA meeting was called. No minutes leaked, but a neighbor heard Carolyn ranting about witch hunts. Then a letter arrived at our house, no cinder, just a typed threat of further sanctions for antagonistic behavior. Emily was rattled. I wasn't. It meant they were scared. I filed a public records request for HOA financials, 30 days to comply, or I'd escalate it to my office. An audit firm found $220,000 in shady expenses, fake landscaping deals tied to Carolyn's cousin. Then a neighbor dropped off copies of internal HOA emails, including one from Carolyn. "I don't care if his wife's mother died, rules are rules. I'll leave YCT them if he pushes." That was her downfall. A courier from my office delivered the investigation notice to Carolyn: nonprofit violations, fund misuse, illegal security. Her board crumbled. 2 members quit. The neighborhood buzzed. Residents shared tales of her petty tyranny online. An audit confirmed fraud. $30,000 untracked, payments to a non-existent company owned by her nephew. I handed it to a special counsel, Linda, who lived for cases like this. Subpoenas flew, bank records were seized, and Carolyn was named in a state probe. She ranted at a sparsely attended HOA meeting, blaming outsiders, but the cracks showed. I got an injunction freezing HOA enforcement, fines stopped, security dissolved. A flyer went out. HOA under investigation, no fines owed. The neighborhood exhaled. At the next meeting, I finally spoke. The room was packed. Carolyn's voice faltered as she started. I stood, walked to the front, and introduced myself. "I'm James Harper, State Attorney General. I've watched this HOA break laws, bully residents, and exploit my grieving wife long enough." I laid out the evidence: fraud, illegal fines, intimidation, then stared at Carolyn. "You had my wife dragged from her mother's wake. Rules don't protect you when you break them." I left the room silent, the gears of justice turning. That night, Leonard texted. Carolyn resigned and was moving. Her house went dark, a for sale sign up within days. Peace crept back. Emily tended her mom's garden, hosted a quiet memorial, and smiled again. The HOA dissolved, replaced by a simple neighbor committee. I stayed out of it, content to mow my lawn in peace. One day, passing Carolyn's old place, I gave the new owners a gift, an HOA handbook and a note, just in case. A bulletin board went up, Sarah's note about her mom's garden pinned first. Closure felt better than revenge. As a car with a familiar silhouette drove by one night, I just smiled. If Carolyn ever returned, she'd face a neighborhood ready to fight back.